It is the third model introduced in the 2024 Nadesico collaboration with Meteorot S, sporting a dual motif of one of the most iconic characters in the series as well as that of an iconic ship. It is KSN02 Nadesico Hoshino, with a kit of Shoot, Full Charge, Conceal, Hypercrept, Biped Legs, and the leg ability of Holy Grace, which buffs all leg stats minus armor and heavy limit for every positive buff applied to self. Now you're going to take one look at Hoshino as well as my pure set and mixed score and wonder, why am I grading a full support type like her so highly? Well, this model in particular hides a rather unique secret that can change her from a very powerful support type to an equally as powerful nuker in the span of one turn. But I am getting ahead of myself for what this particular model brings to the table. Shoot Full Charge on the head part is a special skill, and one of the first instances of it on a female type model, so just a little bit more variety there now available to us. But to explain Shoot Full Charge briefly, it basically is the effect of Full Charge, which is to sap the head HP up to about 50% to fully cap the user's Metaforce gauge at 100%, ready for any Metaforce nukes or Metaforce reliant changes or attacks that you can use instantly from turn 2 onwards. But this variant also applies a stack of shoot boost to self, which will also boost the user's shooting damage during the buff is active. However, the other real drawback to Shoot Full Charge is the fact that it will also apply a DOT effect to self, the melt ailment, which means it will slowly whittle Hoshino's HP down over time as long as that ailment is allowed to remain in effect. In short, Hoshino is basically overloading her energy fill rate to the point she's overheating and essentially draining her own HP over time. The right arm of Conceal is a support-based skill that upon activation will grant a 50% boost to evade to herself and all allies on the field. Additionally, this Conceal effect will also negate the effect of any Pierce or AoE skills for one additional hit. More or less, it's going to guarantee you one free graze at the very minimum as long as this effect remains active. And then once that graze is complete, the effect then disappears. But while this is an effect, it does make it a lot harder for enemies to break you, because now you're sponging damage to one part instead of multiple parts that would break you quickly. Hypercrept on the left arm is another support-based skill that will supply 2 random buffs to all allies across the field. These buffs can range from anything from shoot boost to guard boost, mobile boost, radar sight, or anything else in between. It's a rather small pool, but for 2 free buffs that you can supply, it does also mean that because it's random, it can be stacked. Just bear in mind that the maximum number of buffs that you can hold at any given time caps at 4. So if you are already at that more than 2 mark, say at 3 or 4, and you use Hypercrept again, it does mean it's going to overwrite the 2 oldest buffs for whatever chooses to replace it. So just be sure you keep that in mind. But Conceal and Hypercrept do synergize incredibly well with Holy Grace, as it means that the more buffs that she has applied to her, the faster she goes, the easier it is for her to dodge, and the more likely it is that she can reduce damage or even dodge outright for every buff that she has in play. Now, when it comes to numbers across the board, Hoshino is rather tanky, but also kind of par for the course as to what you'd expect of a female-type model. With a head HP of about 4,200, a rather healthy HP pool there for a full charge type of skill, 3899 per arm, and just over 4,000 for the legs, so kind of a nice little middle ground, par for the course type of role as to what you'd expect for a female type, and especially that of a support-based variety. And her heat and cool stats are actually not too shabby in this form either, between the high 500s to the low 700s between all 3 parts. So it does mean she's going to have a pretty easy time running back and forth from the line to throw these buffs and set them up. Her leg stats are actually pretty solid too across the board, with a just shy of 900 there for her base mobility. An evade of 1203 is also nice, as it means that she can dodge or graze pretty consistently without any additional buffs on the side. And a melee and shoot resist at 1138 keeps her in that very nice middle ground zone, and that nice little sweet spot you want to sit in as far as trying to keep your damage low and reduced as possible goes. Now, even though she can only support one heavy part on the legs, that being her head, it still is a very well-rounded support type model that you can bring to the table. Shoot Full Charge may sound relatively weird for her kit at first glance, but Conceal and Hypercrept will synergize incredibly well with her legs and any other ally that she chooses to support while on the field. Now, when it comes to bringing what she has to the table, Shoot Full Charge is the weird one, but that is because she is capable of meta-changing into a battleship-type form. In this form, she exchanges her support kit out entirely for a full shooting nuke kit of Hyper Break, Hyper Missile, Hyper Beam, Flight Legs, and the leg ability of Pupa, which reduces incoming damage when maintaining a specific Metaforce threshold, which is typically between 20 and 30%. And when you look at that, if you use Shoot Full Charge first and then Transform, there you go, you already have your free damage reduction right there. And in this form, Hoshino is also introducing one brand new skill to the table, and that is Hyper Break. Much like it is with any other skill that gets a hyper bonus to it, such as Hyper Thunder, Hyper Virus, Hyper Freeze, or anything else of the like, Hyper Break is basically just standard break, which is good for heavy punish, piercing, and success bonus relative to success, but it also hits notably harder. It does also have a notably higher base success, I am noting here, both of which in the low to mid 1800s. But it is also worth noting that you cannot dodge or defend on cooldown, which is expected of any other hyper-type skill of this variety. And honestly, with a success in the mid 1800s, that means that you probably will almost never miss, if I'm being completely honest with you. And that also means you're going to have an incredibly high chance of being able to score crits more or less like nobody's business. Normally, if you can keep your success above 1,000, between 1,000 and even 12 or 1,300, you're in a pretty good zone. But given that this 1860 is exceptionally high, means you are going to be hitting anything, and it's going to be a very rare moment if anything actually does dodge or graze. Hyper Missile on Drive B is a gunpowder-based skill, which is basically a standard missile attack, but with piercing instead of AoE. So it's going to be a lot easier for this one to break parts more than it is peppering a foe or preparing them for someone else to come behind Hoshino and finish them off. Hyperbeam on Drive C is an optic attribute skill, so it gets a ×2 damage bonus at 30% charge, a ×3 damage bonus at 100% charge. And it's also worth noting that it does not also require any kind of charge or CG to use in order for you to transform. So once you have a full charge or anything close, you are absolutely going to be cooking with that free, basically super nuke at a moment's glance anytime you choose to use it. And it is also worth noting that basically, if you're noticing a pattern here with a gravity skill, a gunpowder skill, and an optic skill, yes, Hoshino is basically able to transform into a mini God Emperor to a point, but arguably she might end up being stronger than God Emperor for a number of reasons just based on what I'm reading here alone. Flight Legs means that Hoshino will be trading a good chunk of her overall speed, of her overall balance for some pretty exceptional speed, and even then, she's really not trading a whole lot of her stats, more or less just kind of circling them around. Her mobility will most certainly go up at almost 1200 at 1176. Her evade will definitely go up at almost 2100 at 2059. However, her melee resist will go down notably lower to about 901, but her shoot resist will also go higher at 1565. So basically, in trading just a little bit of her melee resist, she basically will buff every other stat that counts when it comes to her propulsion and her damage reduction. Now, when it comes to her overall power, though, she is still really packing him, but her heat and cool does definitely take a nosedive, especially with Hyperbeam in the low to mid 400s. All this being said, though, as a pure set score, I honestly have to rate Hoshino a pretty well-rounded 8 out of 10. She can basically go from all-round support to all-round shoot nuker more or less at the press of a button, and she can synergize incredibly well with herself and what she brings to the table. Shoot Full Charge, of course, is absolutely geared toward her meta change mode and what she brings there with Hyper Beam and Pupa exceptionally well, but Conceal and Hypercrept also synergize very well with her base mode in Holy Grace, so she can pack them off very quickly. The only real things to pay attention to here is the fact that with Hyper Break, basically free crits or high chance of crits, but can't dodge or defend, and the fact that Shoot Full Charge will slowly whittle her HP down over time. And Also worth noting, like I said, that you can only stack 4 positive buffs at once before you start overwriting. So just make sure you keep that in mind if you are planning to use Hoshino for any particular instance, especially in her support type form. As mixed parts, I do have to rate her just a hair lower at a 7 out of 10. Primarily, the biggest reason I grade her lower is because you are missing out on basically the free God Emperor that you're getting out of this with her meta change type mode, the free damage reduction, and the high speed that a flight leg does offer. But that's really not a good chunk of... That's really not all of what Hoshino brings to the table. You still have access to shoot full charge with a female type build. You also have access to Conceal and Hypercrept and a very solid bipedal leg with Holy Grace. So you still have some very solid options at your disposal if you choose to use Hoshino on the team.